Sometimes, a work of art doesn't begin when it is written. It begins much earlier, with a loss, or with a fracture that never quite heals. There are books that feel alive, and then there are books that feel like they were waiting quietly, in the dark, for the right moment to exist. The Book of Disquiet belongs to the second kind. Its author, Fernando Pessoa, was born in Lisbon at the end of the 19th century, and very early in life he learned something most people spend decades trying to avoid: that nothing stays. His father died when he was a child. Soon after, his younger brother followed. Then the city of his childhood disappeared too when his family moved far away across continents. Loss did not arrive once. It became the background of his life. Years later, still very young, Pessoa returned alone to Lisbon. And there, almost invisibly, he lived the rest of his days. He worked modest jobs. He walked the same streets. He observed. He wrote. And almost no one noticed. When he died in his 40s, Pessoa had published very little. To the world, he was a minor figure. To history, almost nothing at all. And yet something about him knew otherwise. Because when his belongings were examined after his death, they found a wooden trunk. Inside it, tens of thousands of pages, fragments, notes, reflections, pieces of a mind that never tried to become whole. Among them was a book no one had ever read, a book that would not be published until decades later, a book that would go on to be considered one of the most singular works of the 20th century, the Book of Disquiet. But even calling it a book feels misleading. It has no clear beginning, no clear ending, no storyline to follow. It is made of fragments, observations, moods, thoughts, written somewhere between poetry and confession. You can open it anywhere. You can close it anywhere. And strangely, it still feels complete. Or perhaps more honestly, it feels like a person. Because the book is not written by Fernando Pessoa, at least not exactly. It is attributed to someone else, a quiet man, an assistant bookkeeper, a figure who exists only on paper. Pessoa did not write under a single name. He wrote as many people, not pen names, but identities, each with their own voice, their own temperament, their own way of seeing the world. He called them heteronyms. Through them, he explored something unsettling: the idea that the self is not a solid thing, but a collection of shifting perspectives. That who we are depends on where we stand, what we feel, and which part of ourselves is speaking. In the Book of Disquiet, this fragmentation is not a literary trick. It is the subject itself. Again and again, the voice returns to the same sensation: a deep, quiet alienation. The feeling of being present in the world, but never fully inside it. Of thinking constantly, but never arriving. Of feeling deeply, but without clarity. For Pessoa, self-understanding is not a journey toward truth. It is a descent. Not toward answers, but toward deeper uncertainty. To look too closely at oneself is to discover that there is no stable core waiting underneath. Only movement. Only contradictions. And this realization produces what he called disquiet. Not dramatic despair, not loud suffering, but a constant, low-level unease. A sense that being conscious at all is already too much. He often wrote about futility, about the emptiness of action, about the strange idea that life itself might be little more than a dream we take too seriously. Achievement, effort, ambition, all of it seemed strangely artificial to him. What mattered was not what happened outside, but the endless inner commentary that never stopped. Writing for him was not a way to express meaning. It was a way to reduce intensity, to lower the fever of existing. And here, a paradox appears. Why write so obsessively about the pointlessness of writing? Why construct such a careful work around the idea that nothing truly matters? Perhaps because paradox itself was the medicine. In medicine, exposure to a weakened form of an illness can create resistance. In the same way, art may expose us to the difficulty of being alive, not to cure it, but to make it survivable. The Book of Disquiet does not offer comfort in the usual sense. It does not reassure you that everything will be fine. It does not promise resolution. Instead, it does something subtler. It says, you are not broken for feeling this way. Your confusion is not a failure of understanding. Your unease is not a personal defect. It is part of the structure. Perhaps that is why the book remained unfinished, not by design, but by fate. It was completed by time, not intention, read long after its author could no longer revise it, known only when it could no longer be changed, like a person. There is something quietly unsettling in realizing that the author's own name translates simply to person, as if the book were never meant to belong to one individual, but to anyone willing to recognize themselves in it. Pessoa once imagined a future in which he would finally be understood, but only after he was gone. Only when understanding no longer mattered to him. And that future arrived, not as recognition, but as resonance. Today, people read these words and feel seen by someone who never knew them, comforted by a voice that never intended to comfort. The Book of Disquiet can feel devastating, but it can also feel strangely gentle, not because it offers hope, but because it removes the demand for it. Sometimes the treatment is not optimism. Sometimes it is simply exposure to the truth that being human has always been uncertain, and that this uncertainty, shared quietly across time, might be enough. If this kind of reflection resonates with you, you're welcome to stay. There will be more.